Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be doing a video on Kenshi, but more specifically we're going to be doing a video on the First Empire in Kenshi. Now, not a lot of people know about the First Empire or even the Second Empire for that matter, or any lore about Kenshi whatsoever. So I'm here going to tell you about some of the things that are in Kenshi's history pretty much. Now I did get this information off of Reddit. So this is not stuff that I necessarily found myself. There's this Reddit user named Just Joey, and he has made a pretty much history book of the First Empire and also the Second Empire. But today we're going to be first focusing on the First Empire. So let us begin. The First Empire is the earliest recorded civilization in Kenshi. We do not know much about the First Empire. We don't even know when they came to be, nor what came before them. However, we do know that the First Empire lasted for a very, very long time. But the information on how long it lasted is still unknown. Now, the Second Empire did not last as long as the First Empire. Now, this is actually quoted from the game, also quoted from the Reddit post. The First Empire was more long-lived than the Second Empire, said by Finch. This is quoted in-game. So if you go to Finch in-game, you'll be able to have him say that. So let's continue. We also know from the large spread of their ruins that they occupied most, if not all, of the continent explorable in-game. So that means that pretty much the entire gaming map, the entire map was conquered by the First Empire. And if not all of it, then most of it was. The culture of the First Empire. Let's get into the culture of the First Empire. The civilization would comprise the First Empire today refers as only the ancients, as there is very little information on them, besides the fact that they were hyper advanced in their technology. We do know, however, that the ancient civilization involved multiple tiers of citizens, meaning that just like in medieval times in our history, there is the peasants, the artisans, the nobles, and then the lords themselves that ruled over. So we can only assume that something like that was how the First Empire was being ruled as. The significant changes in elaborateness of ruins shows a heavy divide between cascades. Now, to prove this theory of multiple tiers of citizens, there was a significant change in elaborateness of ruins shows a heavy divide between cascades, said by Finch again. It is likely that this cascade system consists of human on one caste tier and skeletons on the other, due to our knowledge that skeletons did in fact make up part of this empire. Now, this also being said that humans were automatically above skeletons in the way things were laid out. So this could be assumed that humans got all the better jobs and skeletons were really doing the grunt work and more of the laborful work, and humans ruled over the skeletons in a way, kind of like the skeletons were the slaves. Based on the tech found in the labs of the First Empire, skeletons definitely existed within the culture. Now this is just a little bit of a proof to show you that yes, they were in the First Empire. Also, again, said by Finch. Here is the first split in possibility. Now here is where things differentiate. Now, it says that either one could have been on top, either humans or the skeletons were the masters of the First Empire. The first possibility is that the skeletons were the higher of the castes and commanded the human beneath them. The first possibility is that the skeletons were the higher caste and commanded the human beneath them. It is pointed out by some scholars that, judging by the relics and advanced tech from the First Empire, its culture was largely skeleton based. Who created him? What came first, the chicken or the egg, pretty much? The skeletons or the ancient master race. So far, we have not found any tech that would be capable of organic creation, but many of the ruins indicate a strong skeleton presence. Skeletons were either the sole race of ancient civilization or the master race. No evidence suggests any other dominant race. How the skeleton first came into being is irrelevant. This may at first seem like a strong indication that the first emperor was dominated by skeletons, who, for one reason or another, either created or coexisted with humanity. However, this may at first seem like a strong indication that the first empire was dominated by skeletons who, for one reason or another, either created or coexisted with humanity. This may at first seem like a strong indication that the first empire was dominated by skeletons who, for one reason or another, either created or coexisted with humanity. However, the opposite could very well be true, as the skeletons described their kind as man creation under certain circumstances. Man became afraid of the destructive capability of its own creation, said by a skeleton player character during dialogue when it entered obedience. While the question of who created who remains largely a mystery, we are still left with the question of who held the power within the First Empire culture. This question may be seen in a better light after considering what comes next. The First Empire is rocked by conflict. Now I'm going to go into a little bit of information on what I think on who I think was the master race. I believe the master race was not the skeletons because if you see the skeletons in Kenshi, they're kind of like robots. They're not actually skeletons of human beings. They are robots, and they need oil to survive, and they can't be healed up with normal medical kits. They need their own special robotic first aid kit, and it heavily implies that something like that would need to be created and not just spawn onto Earth somehow or be made from evolution. So it is I believe that the first master race was humans instead of skeletons. At some point, the Empire went to war with an unspecified foe. Whoever it was against and whatever ignited the conflict, it was obviously fierce enough to warrant the creation of the behemoth. Enormous skeletons that could tower over the other races as superweapons. Little at all is known of this conflict. However, it would appear that the First Empire was victorious and was thus left with the presumably intelligent and aware behemoths, whose destructive abilities they began to fear. We therefore know more about the aftermath of the conflict than we do the conflict itself, and that aftermath can be witnessed firsthand in obedience. Now, this is a quote from the skeleton character when entering obedience. After the war, the behemoths lost their purpose. Man became afraid of the destructive capabilities of its own creations. The irony is that it was their blind obedience and unquestioning loyalty that walked them down into that pit, entirely unresisting the price of obedience. Now, this is a quote by a skeleton who presumably was alive during the First Empire. Now, it is currently impossible for a skeleton to procreate or make new skeletons. So all the skeletons that are here now are actually all the skeletons that were around during the First Empire. So all skeletons are very, very old. And this just gives another reason to why I believe that the humans were the first master race, because like they said, they created behemoths and they were just big skeletons pretty much. So let's continue anyway. Let's continue on. Not only does this further cement the idea that humanity were the masters of First Empire society, as skeletons, in this case behemoths, would obey their commands unquestioningly, but it also offers a glimpse into a deep psychological trend towards the decline of the empire: fear. It is notable that the one behemoth escaped, Stobe, who will come to play a part in later events. That is, essentially all we know of this conflict. But we got some more glimpse into the chain of events that it thrust into motion afterwards. Now, we're going to be talking about next the fall of the First Empire. The next notable event that we can see mentioned is the collapse of the empire. There are several theories by modern scholars as to how exactly this occurred. Natural disaster is the most logical theory. This would explain the larger areas of destruction, and it may even tie in more plausibly with the arcanite tellings of the first extinction by tribal brainlessly associating it with an act of God. Finch. Remaining damages to the ruins show destruction either by means of natural disaster or the use of a superweapon and internal conflict. Sabina. A superweapon or sizable destructive force could have been well within the ancients' capabilities and would explain the significant loss of land. Too much power was the ancients' downfall. When civil war and internal discontent finally hit them, the result was devastation by their own hands. I did. I don't know. Only biological and environmental factors can explain this. The ancients certainly had intellectual capacity to carry out biological warfare against each other, which the skeletons would have survived. In fact, an attack could have easily been carried out by the skeletons themselves. Actictus? I don't know. Moving on. Now, this shows you, again, that the skeletons were more than likely created by the humans, considering that they could survive biological warfare, so they don't need to breathe. They're machines. So again, more proof stating that the humans were the master race. Let's continue. Each of these theories may contain nuggets of truth, but we get hints as to what likely truly occurred during this time from several dialogues. The skeletons attempted to wipe out humanity. The exact means of this genocidal attempt isn't certain, but some good possibilities are within the theories above. A biological weapon, a force, a natural disaster, a simple overpoweringly destructive superweapon, which the skeletons were able to escape. Any and all of these in combination with the also theorized civil war. Whatever the case, it seems extremely likely that the skeleton uprising began in direct retaliation to the massacre at Obedience, either immediately or after a period of time in which the skeletons grew increasingly disenfranchised with their creators. We can piece this together by reference to several pieces of lore with one aspect in common. The skeletons do not want anyone knowing what occurred at the fall of the Empire. Now I'm going to read off a couple quotes that you can hear from the skeletons. Look, you don't need to worry. No one will ever know the truth. As long as I am Finch's second in command, I will see to that myself. EO, the second in command to Finch, obviously. I'm protecting the valuable knowledge that humans need to survive. And obviously, in this position, I can keep certain things hidden too, you know. Bookshop trader of the Great Library speaking to a skeleton player character. Why is it most likely that this supposed cover-up is referring to the actions of the skeletons in the final days of the First Empire? Because of the specific information we see IO attempted to conceal, someone has spilled ink all over this book, likely a simple accident. Nothing of significance is readable anymore. Tech hunters. It is clear that skeletons do not want the events of obedient. It is clear that the skeletons do not want the events at Obedience to be known, even though they were the victims of it. And this is likely due to the question that would arise. What did skeletons do about it? The answer. They set in motion an extinction event. The exact nature of this event is unknown. It could be biological, as some theories stated earlier, or it could be a more conventional weapon. Several missiles are found across the world, one of which lies next to the stove bodies itself. Indeed, the missiles themselves may have been biological in nature. It could also be the case that the skeletons used the eyes against humanity. Great satellites capable of burning away large swaths of organic life. Oh man, I forgot that thing is still there. You can see in the distance there. It's still chugging away even now. I remember it when it was flying around, wrecking death and destruction everywhere it went. It's safe now though. Good riddance to it. Shame the other one is still running though. Skeleton player character dialogue when entering the eye. The mercy of Stobe. The mercy of Stobe. Arguably, none had a greater reason to wish annihilation upon humanity than Stobe, the sole surviving behemoth. His brothers had all been knowingly walked to their doom, slain out of fear, with the reason for his own escape from this fate being unknown. Perhaps simple luck, it would not be all that surprising to learn that he participated in, or even masterminded the attack on humanity. Elder, leader of the skeleton bandit, tell us of the Stobe and war. He is a martyr of skeletons, exterminator of the human plague. Thanks to his sacrifice in the human war, we live to continue to reset the land to its former purity once again. He may be gone, but our cause is not lost. Elder, dialogue 1 asking about Stobe. However, the truth is much more humbling. When Elder is questioned on this topic by a skeleton, we see this exchange. Exterminating of humans? That's a lie, you know it. And what of it? Exchange with elders when questioned by a skeleton player character. Stobe did not participate in the events of the first extinction, as the Orcanites refer to it. Despite the good reason he had to do so, instead he decided to save those that recently condemned him to die. An interesting glimpse can be seen in the Orcanite text, which has become forbidden within the Holy Nations. The use of the Holy Nation text may seem strange in this context, but as the scholar Sabina put it, we cannot write off the historical input of an established religion on account of disciples' irrational interception of it. Clouded with irrationality, it may be, but I believe we can still salvage some truth from its ancient foundation. Sabina. The events in the Orcanite scripture may have been built into more of a symbolic religious parable over the many generations of the religion development and growth. However, they are no doubt based originally from some real event that has simply surfaced from a case of Chinese whispers. So what does this written scripture say that might relate to Stobe? Well, I'm glad you asked. The great father Churton was betrayed by his children, broken by their sins and their lack of faith, and so the great father's power diminished and calamity erupted. But only when the lands began to swallow themselves did the children plead for help. Only at a time of desperation and fear did their devotion burn its brightest. But the great father was pure and forgiving, so he sacrificed himself for his beloved children, to give them a new chance at life. He cleansed the planet of its sickness, but the task was too much. The Book of Sacrifice. There seems to be considerable similarities, though the name of the being has changed over time to Sheraton. We know that the Orcanites originated as a cult in the Second Empire, and it would appear that the deity this cult may have worshipped was very likely Stobe, who saved their species from annihilation. The skeleton, who had also became the servants of darkness, or of Narka, the evil side of the now split god, the evil skeleton, who were not Stobe, the good skeleton. Said emotion, the wanting to cleanse the planet of sicknesses, suggests that perhaps the theory that biological weapons were used indeed, but the most likely scenario, and still prevented these weapons from completely wiping out organic life as a cost of his own, despite the fact that at the time those he was saving wanted him dead. Either harkens back to the description of the behemoth blind loyalty to humanity and obedience, or perhaps it is simply the case that humanity and their immense fear made monsters of creations which were capable and willing to perform great acts of selflessness, even for their enemies. The reason this tomb was likely made forbidden long ago is due to the fact that it venerates a skeleton as their savior, which is, as the religion became more and more warlike and xenophobic, became unacceptable. It is also interesting to note that while one reason the skeletons may wish for this series of events to be covered and forgotten is due to the rather large incriminating implications against them, there may be another reason, and it may also be why the skeletons themselves also seem to venerate Stobe, despite him supposedly spoiling their doomsday plan. They regretted what they begun. As swath of humanity began dying in horrifying anguish, Whether by biological warfare, obliteration by the eye, or anything else, it would appear that the skeleton realized the gravity of what they'd done. Fully sentient and capable of feeling sadness, anger, excitement, compassion, thrill, and enjoyment, although they don't possess the ability to express anything visually, is an in-game racial description of skeleton. Will you ever forgive us humans? Ignore him. His mind is broken. Exchange between skeletons in Black Desert City. This place is way too sad. Do you think he's crying? Skeletons don't cry, you idiot. Skeletons are always crying. Dialogue between a skeleton and two non-skeleton player characters upon seeing Stobe. The result of Stobe's sacrifice seems to have put skeletons kind of to shame. Many seem remorseful of what occurred. Even if they don't want to elaborate on it, this may also be a contributing factor to the skeleton memory wipes, with skeletons who hold on to their memories being driven insane, although this may simply be due to an overload of memory capacity. Either way, with the first empire wiped out and the humanity almost driven extinct, the skeletons found themselves mirrored in regret for what they'd done. The result of this deep regret and sadness aren't certain to us, but we can gather some clues. A large portion of salvaged skeletons remain show suicide to be the cause of death. But what was the reasoning behind this tragic mass suicide? The skeletons are logical thinkers. It makes sense that once they have carried out their life purpose, that there is no need for them to live on. Existential crisis, if you will. It did. An existential crisis indeed. At any rate, the age of the First Empire was over, and no amount of regret was going to bring it back. The world was ravaged and desolate, and a time was about to begin of great stagnation and sorrow, of which we have no records. The age of chaos had begun. Now, this is the end of the First Empire and the end of my first video. Now, going into the Second Empire, we're going to be focusing mainly on the skeletons, because the skeletons actually do become the master race over the human, kind of like protectors. But we'll get more into that when that video comes out. But if you did enjoy this video, please give it a like. And if you wanted to talk about anything in the First Empire, if you had any questions, please comment down below. And if you really did enjoy the video, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It would really help me out and keep me motivated to make these videos. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.